So we're looking at an area. We don't have our flashlights with us because I don't know why we didn't carry our flashlights with us, but we didn't have them. I wish we did. But we see a white silhouette of like a human silhouette crawling on all fours, just emerge from the woods.
Greetings and salutations, everybody. This is Alex Koska with Odd Virginia. I will be your host and your guide as we delve into the strange and paranormal happenings here within the Commonwealth of Virginia. And today I have a young man that I found on Reddit of all places. I've been trying to reach out to people on Reddit and finally got one to share their story here on the show. So Shane hails to us from Mechanicsville, which is in Hanover County, just northeast of Richmond. And he shares a couple of stories with us tonight, one of which involves the crawler creature, popularly known as the pale crawler. Some people call them forest ghouls. Some people might even call it the legendary Wendigo. And some people might also call it the rake, although I don't call it the rake because that is a piece of fiction that was written for creepypasta on 4chan sometime in the early aughts. And for that reason, I don't like calling it the rake. I feel like it kind of takes away the genuineness of the creature, descriptions of which go all the way back to the Algonquin tribes, well before our European ancestors even set foot on this land. So this is the second time we've had somebody on the show to talk about one of these creatures. And on top of that, the Mechanicsville area also has a turbulent past, being home to one of the battles of the Civil War. Actually, multiple battles called the 7-Day Battles. This was 1 year on in the Civil War, and a lot of young Confederate and Union soldiers died there. So it's sure to be haunted, and we'll find out more about that when we talk to Shane here in just a minute. But before we do, I want to go ahead and say if you have had any sort of paranormal experience here within the Commonwealth, if you know any of the strange history of Virginia, or if you're aware of any local legends, please send us an email. I'd love to hear from you. My email address is oddvirginia@protonmail.com. Go ahead and get in contact with me. Like I said, I'd love to hear from you. Because here at Odd Virginia,
we're ready to believe you!
All right, today on the show we have Shane. This is somebody I found on Reddit who posted a crawler story on r/crawlers. And that intrigued me because this is a story coming from Virginia, in our neck of the woods. So Shane, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you on, man. I just want to real quick hand it over to you, let you give yourself a brief little bio on yourself, whatever you want to share as public record.
I've got a couple interesting things about me. I'm actually trying to start up a band I used to be in, trying to bring it back up, record an album within the next year, I'm hoping maybe. Don't really have a name yet.
What kind of music you guys do?
I guess if you want to go in between hard rock and heavy metal, something in between.
Something with a bit of edge?
A little bit.
Well, that's awesome. I hope it goes well for you. I know a band is a very hard thing to keep together. You need a strong glue to bind you.
It sure is.
Yeah, so how old are you, Shane?
I'm 19.
Okay. So yeah, you're still well within the realms of possibility of trying to make that work.
I'd like to think so.
Definitely have a little more energy at that age. I'm 32 now, so I basically just want to sit down and play Dark Souls.
I can imagine.
So let's get to your crawler story, man. I'm really interested in it. To be honest with you, I read it a good couple of nights ago. My memory's not the best. So could you let us know about where and when this happened?
This happened in late April of 2020. And if you're familiar with the Mechanicsville area, it's Central Virginia, northeast of Richmond.
I've driven by a few times.
Okay. And to be a little more specific, you got the old Mechanicsville area, you've got new Mechanicsville area, a little more east, and a little more east of that is where it gets more rural, where it's a lot of just woods and farmland. Right about where the rural part starts happening, that's where I grew up, and that's where the story actually takes place.
Okay, so this is on the podunk side of Mechanicsville.
Right.
See, I just thought that was all of Mechanicsville, but I don't think I've ever really stopped in, so I don't know too much about it.
It's not exactly a big town, but it's not super small either, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, if you saw where I live, you'd probably say it's podunk as well, so I'm not judging.
I gotcha. It all started with, it was myself and 3 of my friends. And a lot of what we did was go in the woods to hang out, to talk. We do it at night sometimes. We'd bring lights. We'd often carry guns on us for the aesthetic, made us feel safer in the woods. It was my family's property. About somewhere between 50, 70 acres, something like that, of trees, farmland, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a rather respectable tract of land.
Right. So me and some buddies would go back there all the time at night, hang out, drink, whatever. But on this one particular night, we're sitting out there, and we actually had like a little campsite structure we built out of pallets and different little materials like that, just for the fun of it. But we're hanging out there one night, and I forget what the reasoning was, but one of my buddies, I'm not going to say names, but one of my buddies wanted to talk to me about nothing serious, just some sort of chat. He wanted to go walk. So him and I went to go walk down one of the trails. Not very long. We weren't very far from the campsite area, but we get to this field clearing where it's just very open. You can see the stars and everything. Him and I both have our rifles. We're carrying rifles with us. And we're just looking at the stars, talking, like perfectly normal night. All of a sudden, we're hearing some like twig snapping and movement coming from the woods. Not exactly from where we just came from, but so we're looking at an area. We don't have our flashlights with us because I don't know why we didn't carry our flashlights with us, but we didn't have them. I wish we did. But we see a white silhouette of like a human silhouette crawling on all fours just emerge from the woods, and it's sort of positioned a little bit behind a tree, but enough to where we can tell like that it is a human silhouette. It's not hiding, but it is behind a tree. And him and I are like dumbfounded by this. We aim our rifles to it, and we don't really know what to think. So it's not acting in like malice. It's not aggressive. It's not even making any noise. It's just sort of watching. It's moving its head around a little bit. It'll slowly start to crawl out from behind a tree, then crawl its way back just a little bit. It was honestly bobbing its head a little bit, kind of like a chicken, like it was curious of us instead of being like ill-intentioned of us, I suppose.
And kind of like an up and down motion it was bobbing?
More of like a front and back sort of motion.
Sort of like a strut that a chicken does.
Pretty much. So it just sort of tested us a little bit. It seemed like to us anyway. It would crawl out like maybe 2 or 3 feet from the tree, look at us for a couple seconds, crawl back. It did that maybe 4 times, I'd have to say. Meanwhile, my buddy and I are sitting there yelling at it. Not words, just sitting there yelling. And every time I got closer, our yells almost comically drew louder. And when it backed away, they sort of dampened down a little bit. And we're calling for our other 2 friends over at the campsite still to come help us. And of course, they don't show up till after it's gone. But the creature was only there for like maybe 2 minutes before it sort of just disappeared into the brush. It didn't make any noise or anything. The only thing we really could distinguish about it was its white silhouette. And it did have yellow eyes that shined a little bit, depending on how you were looking at it.
Dude, every time I hear about these creatures, I just get the weirdest chills. I don't know if you can relate to that. I mean, you're the one who saw it, so...
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to ask you real quick, for clarification, you said you didn't have your flashlights on you. Was it like a really well moonlit night, or was it just starshine that you were seeing this under?
I'm pretty sure it was a full moon. I can't say for sure. It was at least close.
Yeah, I feel like these things would be fairly easily visible under a full moon just because of that white light coming down, reflecting off a pale or gray skin.
Right.
And about how far away were you from it when it came out?
I'd have to say maybe 3 yards, if that.
Oh, wow. That's a whole lot closer than the visual story in my head was showing me. Yeah, that is incredibly close.
Yeah, not very far at all.
And one more question before we continue. You said that it was kind of snapping twigs and making a little bit of a rustling when it was approaching. Was that
Right.
kind of comparable to the amount of noise that, like, say, a squirrel would make, or a deer, or something sounding even maybe bigger?
Honestly, it was probably less twig snapping and like leaf rustling than like a squirrel or a deer would make. It was more like you'd hear a little bit of rustling, there'd be a pause, hear a little bit more rustling, kind of like it was trying to be sneaky, if you catch my drift.
It sounds like it was quite stealthy.
But so my other two friends finally do show up, and they thought we'd run into like a person, like a hunter or something. So they had unloaded their firearms, and we're just like, "Who'd you see? What's going on?" Which, I don't know. We explained it to them, and they kind of seemed like they didn't quite believe us.
That's the expected reaction.
Yeah. They were sort of like, "Oh, well, yeah, okay, yeah, uh-huh." I honestly still don't know if they believe us or not to this day. They claim they do, but I never really got a solid reaction from them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think if someone who doesn't know much about cryptozoology or doesn't really have much invested in the paranormal world per se, would have a very hard time believing this kind of thing. But if
Right.
you're anything like me and just spend a lot of time on crawler sightings, or listen to those podcasts where people report their stories of seeing these things, it's actually quite common. I know someone who lives right down here. Our first episode, The Creature That Followed Me Home, is about one of these creatures that. Not only did she see it in Tom's Brook, but she also saw it 40 miles away from that a couple weeks later in Harrisonburg. Yeah, these things are definitely here in Virginia for certain. And it's it's kind of terrifying, to be honest, because I'm the kind of guy who has been out in the woods at night alone. I like to hike the AT every now and then, just do little sections. And I'll be out there a week alone. And I never really thought about these things until pretty recently. And I don't know if I'll ever go back out and do that again.
Huh, that's interesting. I actually just got off the Appalachian Trail. I was going just on an overnight camping trip with my girlfriend. I think it was last weekend.
Oh, it's gorgeous out there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which part did you do?
We tried to go on the Love Gap Trail entrance. It was blocked off for some reason, so we went a couple miles, I think south it was, and just went on Reed's Gap.
Okay.
That trail. But so to follow up on that story, the next day, me and the same group of friends went out there that morning, probably around maybe 11 o'clock. And the friend I was with who witnessed this thing with me is actually a pretty skilled hunter. He's been doing it like his whole life. He also knows a thing or two about tracking. So we get to tracking this thing, and I don't really quite see it, but apparently he says that there was a lot of leaf disturbances that he could clearly see where we saw it. And once he explained it to me a little bit, I understood it a little bit better. But we tracked this thing going downhill a little bit towards this creek. And once we got to the creek, we couldn't find anything else.
So likely it retreated into the water?
It's a very thin creek. I'd like to think it went over the creek, and maybe we just couldn't see the tracks anymore. But I suppose it is possible it went over the creek. Although I can't really picture that in my head. I'm not going to completely denounce it.
So that is some kind of validation, that the fact that you were able to find physical signs of his being there the next day shows that this thing is at least somewhat tangible. It was able to leave, its own tracks. I also wanted a little clarification on how big was this thing? Just normal human size, or was it any bigger or smaller?
If it were to stand up and be bipedal, I'd like to imagine it would be maybe 5'7", kind of on the shorter side.
Okay.
I don't know that for sure because of it was at night. I couldn't get a super good look at it. I kind of wish I could have had a flashlight so I can see its at like actual details.
Were you able to tell much about the thinness or the weight of it?
Not a whole lot, honestly. I mean, most sightings I hear of, they are really thin, but from what I could tell, it was all pretty normal proportions, I'd say.
Yeah, normally you get the report that they're quite emaciated, like, 10 times out of 11. That's what they say. But then have you ever seen the Rick Grebenik video where he films the thing in his yard through his screen, his window screen, as it's sort of moving in and out of the tall grass? It's a fairly close shot. And you can see in that video that the thing has a little more meat on its bones than what the most descriptions would say. It actually looks like it's not just skin and bones, but actually has maybe a little bit of a musculature to it as well.
Huh, I have not seen that. That's interesting.
It's a really, really, really interesting video. And I was never sure to the validity of it. But when I showed it to my friend who we had on episode 1, who had seen one in Harrisonburg, she said that the movements were very much on point. And I've read that as well elsewhere, that when people see that, they, it sends shivers up their spines because it matches very much the movements of what they saw. Maybe not the exact weight of the thing, but the movements definitely line up.
Okay, yeah. And I also kind of feel like a lot of people would claim that these sightings are fake, maybe because one person's testimony of what they saw could be different from another person's testimony. But honestly, who's to say that each individual of these creatures couldn't be just different, just like people are? Some people are built different, maybe walk different. I mean, who's to say it's not the same for these things?
Oh, yeah. People have seen different colored ones of these as well, ranging from, white to ash gray all the way down to black. And, humans have variations as well. Who's to say that something else couldn't? So there's no reason to say that couldn't be a possibility whatsoever. They're not all cookie cutter creatures. Did you have anything else to share about the follow-up with your investigation? You had your friend track it?
Only 2 things. Thing number 1, maybe a week after we had sighted this thing, the friend I had seen it with told his parents about it. And they claimed, well, actually not they, his stepmother claimed to have seen it while she was driving down the road, which passes my house and passes right through the woods we saw that in. And she claims that she saw something of similar nature on the side of the road. I think on the side of the road, something like that. She was driving by and claimed she saw something similar.
And that's how most sightings occur. You're driving down the road and it's like, hey, what's that? Okay, it's gone now. I'm down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So most people don't have the luck that you had there and actually got a good look at it. I'm sure at the time it might not have felt like good luck to get that much of a look at the thing, but
right.
Yeah, that's a very rare experience indeed. And 2 minutes, that's a long time. It didn't run away. It just kind of stayed around and checked you out while you were you just shouting at it to like make it go away, to scare it off?
Actually, no. I didn't even know what to think at the time. I was just shouting, I guess, just on my instinct. We were both just, not actually speaking to it, but just shouting in amazement, maybe.
Okay.
I'm not actually sure why we were shouting. We just were.
No, that's totally understandable to me. If I saw something and didn't know what to do with what was there, I'd just start, yeah!
Right. But and another thing about it, I'm not sure if this is related, but I feel like it could be. So remember when I mentioned that we were tracking its leaf disturbance trail, if you will, and it ended at a creek?
Yeah.
Well, I think probably maybe a month before this happened, we were in that little creek area, walking through the woods for whatever reason, and we found a goat skull, a very small goat skull, but it didn't look like any normal goat skull I've ever seen. Like, almost like it didn't have a snout, but it wasn't broken off. It was just naturally formed like that. It looked very strange. I'd never seen a skull look like that, but it did have horns. I'm not even quite sure how to describe it.
Okay, so normally on a goat skull, like their snout part would be cartilage, right? And when they die, that should degrade and just become a big empty blank space, right?
Yes.
I haven't seen many goat skulls myself, but yeah. So it didn't have like that cavity there where the snout would have been?
No, it didn't. It had a bit of a cavity where like maybe a nose where it would have been or something, but I could be wrong and it could have been completely legit. But just based on what I saw, it didn't appear to have that cavity where the snout would have been, and it just didn't look normal to me.
Yeah, that's very odd.
It also didn't have the rest of the carcass either. It was just the skull, which I found very odd.
Well, presumably something picked that head or skull up and dropped it wherever you found it. But
Right.
the thing that I find very interesting about that is the tale of the Wendigo. You know, it's commonly depicted with the horned skull or like deer skull on. It makes you wonder because normally I just think, oh, that's just a bunch of Hollywood BS. But then every now and then you actually hear a story of somebody seeing one of these creatures that looks like it has a skull for a head.
Right.
Maybe that's some kind of a wild hunt sort of helmet kind of thing. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I guess that's a Celtic or a Norse tradition, the wild hunt, where somebody wears the stag skull and they run off on the frenzied hunt.
I haven't heard a lot about it, but I've seen those kinds of depictions before.
Yeah. So I was curious, what, if anything, I mean, there isn't. I'm going to pull a Wes Germer on you here. If anything, what do you think that this might be as far as its origins or its nature?
Well, I can't say anything for certain. Like nobody can.
Right.
But I kind of speculate that maybe their origin is from cave systems, although there aren't any major discovered cave systems around Central Virginia that I know of. But I don't know. I kind of speculate maybe there's some kind of, at least some sort of hole it shelters in.
Yeah, that seems to be the prevailing theory. And I couldn't disagree. I feel like a lot of these things are seen in places that are fairly cavernous. And maybe you just don't know yet about some sort of chasm in the area.
Right. And honestly, I don't know. I have a couple theories. Not that I full-heartedly believe them, but one of them is a little bit out there that possibly maybe these creatures were once just a different species of human, kind of like Neanderthals. Yeah. But since technology, humans, and evolution, they've resided to the woods, to the caves, and now this is just what their species is. It's a little far-fetched, but it's an idea I've thought about it a little bit.
Well, I couldn't dismiss it as outside the realm of possibility. Normally, when I consider these sorts of theories regarding these mysterious and unknown creatures, every answer is the right answer until we actually find the right answer, right? You don't take anything off the table until you know for sure. And will we ever know for sure? Beats me. But yeah, that's absolutely terrifying and wonderful story at the same time. I'm glad to know that this is another one of those cases where these things do not seem to be, malignant or aggressive. That has proven time and time again, despite the lore, the folklore, and the common conceptions around them. They tend to be very curious and non-confrontational.
Right, and we're always afraid of things we don't understand as humans.
Absolutely. Well, Shane, I want to thank you for that story. I was going to ask if you had anything else that you might want to talk about while we're on here.
Well, sure. I actually had a lot of paranormal experiences around there. Not saying that crawlers or whatever the creature could be is or isn't paranormal, but just in a similar genre, I have had a couple experiences that I could talk about.
Well, it is outside the normal, so I think by definition, any cryptid creature is paranormal.
Huh. All right.
That's just my definition of paranormal. But anyway.
I got you. So I guess I could jump in with one of the earliest, instances I can remember. I don't remember which year, but I remember it was New Year's Eve. And we had a black lab who was sick. Her name was River. She was just our family dog. She was sick, or she was like hacking and doing that like weird dog cough. She actually passed away that evening, New Year's Eve.
I'm sorry, man. Black labs make the best family pets.
Right. I totally agree.
That's sad.
But nothing out of the ordinary there, except just the sadness with losing your family dog. So I'm in the bathroom brushing my teeth, getting ready for bed that evening after family dog passed away, and I look to the door frame and there's a black shadow standing there, a silhouette, and it just disappears the second I look at it. Like I look, and it's there for just enough time for my brain to register it, and it's gone. And I was maybe somewhere in the middle school age, and I freaked out. I ran into the living room all scared and everything. I told my dad about it, and my dad was like, "Oh yeah, I see that stuff sometimes. It'll be all right." So apparently my dad's seeing this stuff now. This was news to me. I did have a couple more sightings of the black shadow sort of thing.
Was it in like a humanoid figure?
From what I remember, it was all I could really distinguish was maybe just a black rectangle with the shape of shoulders and a head. That's all I remember. It probably was just a whole silhouette, but that's all I remember from memory, I guess.
And it's not surprising that your dad didn't say anything until you said something first. That seems to be like the modus operandi for fathers who want to be sort of a stoic figure and not freak out about anything.
Mm-hmm.
So they never mention anything first. They always come forward after you have.
Huh, I've never actually thought of it that way.
That seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of these weird stories. Someone tells their dad and they're like, yeah, I saw that. Like, well, why didn't you say so?
Huh. Well, I feel like it's before I continue with the other sightings, I feel like it's appropriate to give a little backstory on the property that I grew up on. It was actually a pretty heavy area for Civil War history. I actually did a little bit of research. The Battle of Cold Harbor I don't know if it went directly through the property. It went at least near, but there's other battles that happened right on the property and the farmland that I grew up on. We would find artifacts like cannonballs. We'd have some metal detecting guys go out there, say they found like buttons and things like that.
Wow.
So a lot of Civil War history there. Battles fought, that kind of thing, which I feel like may have ties to the paranormal stuff I've seen.
Normally it does. In Civil War spots, there seems to be a lot of these sort of ghostly apparitions, which could explain the Shadow Man that you saw.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a feeling there might be some more coming.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. So to give another story, in the same woods where the crawler experience happened, this was, I think, my freshman year of high school. We decided to build an airsoft arena, and I'm not sure if you know what airsoft is, but it's kind of like paint. It's kind of like paintball. Like plastic BB guns, or you can get like the super good metal full auto versions or whatever.
Oh yes.
But we had a bunch of pallets and plywood and stuff like that. We're building these structures and leaf blowing trails and everything. And one of my friends at the time had a leaf blower. He was leaf blowing one of the trails we were building. And I didn't actually see it, but this was his testimony. He said that he turned around and saw a black shadow, just like the one I described to you from the previous story, standing right next to him, looking down at the leaf blower. And I remember hearing him scream from the woods. He yelled, "Oh shit," and then dropped it, ran to me, and explained to me what he saw. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen that before.
I was just curious as to what he was doing, I'm sure. If this was a Civil War era ghost, it was like, what the heck is that?
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm sorry, what is this? It's kind of funny to think about, honestly.
Sort of witchcraft is blowing the leaves everywhere. Wind machine? What is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But a couple more less exciting ones about the Black Shadow stuff. There's a couple times where myself, plenty of my family members, a couple of my friends say they look out to the field, broad daylight, and just see a black shadow like across the field, maybe I don't know how long, like a pretty sizable distance away, enough to where you'd want to maybe put binoculars on to see if it was like a real person or not.
Mm-hmm.
And these apparitions would just move across the entire field like crazy fast, like point A to point B, zip, done. That happened quite a few times where my dad, like, there's this one time I came home and my dad was like, oh yeah, I saw another one of those shadows dart across the field. Sometimes he'd say they appear to have rifles on their shoulders or funny looking hats on. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, that is incredibly interesting, especially the rifles bit, because that sort of adds a little bit more weight to the idea that it might be a Civil War, silhouette of a ages past.
Right. But I do have another story. I've got a couple of these random stories. I think this was my 8th grade year of school. Me and one of my buddies were in my backyard. I've got a pretty sizable backyard surrounded by soybeans or corn or whatever was growing in the fields. And this was when we first started getting into airsoft. We weren't quite at the level of building the airsoft arena in the woods. We had like the little spring action plastic guns that weren't really all that good, but we still had fun with them.
Yeah, I had one of those as well.
Yeah, there you go. And we were about to play a game in my backyard, just him and I. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to start in the backyard. You start in the front yard. So he goes up to the front yard. He's sort of in a corner between the field. He's standing in the yard in the corner. And to his back is the road. It's not a very busy road, but, there's just a road. And this was around dusk. It was starting to get dark a little bit. And I didn't see it, but he claims he saw it. He claims he saw, if I can remember correctly, it was definitely a silhouette. It was white, had like drapey, like torn clothes on. Had I completely forget how he described the face, but it was some sort of ugly, hideous face he described. And I just remember him freaking out and running to me and telling me what he saw. That seems to be a recurring theme, actually.
So it sounds like what he saw might have been something that is fairly war-torn, as it sounds. You said it was wearing raggedy clothes and a hideous face. Maybe this is the appearance of somebody who's been shot up or stabbed or, anything like that.
Possibly.
That's the scariest kind of apparition one could get, is those who appear as they did when they're dead.
Yeah, I never really thought about what it could be. I was just always like, oh, okay, yeah, that happened. Didn't give it a whole lot of thought after that.
Is he okay after that?
Oh yeah, I think he's had a couple experiences himself. None I can remember off the top of my head at this moment, but I'm pretty sure he's had a couple paranormal experiences. And he's not a very easily shakeable person either.
Yeah, something like that would shake most people right to the core.
Right. So another story I can give. So I used to have this app. I paid like $15 for it on Google Play. It's called Echo Vox, and it was supposedly an EVP system you can install on your phone. And I used to use that a lot because I was starting to get into the whole paranormal thing, and I was like, all right, I'm going to see if this works. Sometimes I felt like it gave me solid responses. Sometimes it didn't. I can't really say much about my actual use of it, except for one particular time, which was honestly, I think the last time I used it, not because I was afraid of using it anymore. It would just happen to be that way.
Yeah.
But me and a couple buddies are in the woods, like in all my other stories, and we're using this thing, and we're asking it questions in this official way, like they do on TV. And we're wrapping it up, and we're like, all right, we're going to turn this off now. Goodbye. So when this app's running, it makes a weird, staticky echo noise, very loud and annoying while it's running. And, the voices come on or whatever. But that weird echo static thing stopped, and we heard a very clear goodbye, and the app crashed.
Ooh.
On my phone. So that definitely sent. I'm actually feeling chills down my spine right now from thinking about it. But
and that application had never acted like that before.
Nope, never.
Ooh, yeah, that's something, I'd say.
It didn't quite scare us out of the woods, though. I remember one of my friends freaking out and wanting to leave. He's like, "Let's leave, let's leave, let's leave," and the rest of us are like, "Nah," and we just hung out for a little bit longer.
It just said goodbye. That's not really threatening, right?
It depends.
Now, if somebody's pointing a gun at your head and saying goodbye, then that's threatening. However, you didn't even see anything.
Right. So, I can't see you, so you're not a threat, I guess.
Yeah, that would be my line of logic.
I think we all had a little bit of fear lingering in us after that, but we just pushed through it for whatever reason.
Well, yeah, sure, it's weird, but it's not threatening.
Maybe a little threatening, but nothing we can't handle, I guess.
I kind of had the same feeling. There's one time I had a experience at a Civil War location. A buddy of mine had a family cabin, and they would all take turns staying at this cabin, just sort of as a little getaway from technology and all that kind of stuff. And my buddy and I were probably
Mhm.
about in middle school at the time, and this is way out in the woods in this cabin. And he told me on the way there that, whenever they stay at this place, the toilets flush on their own or the water will turn on, and it's definitely haunted, right? So
Huh.
that gets me just kind of, my senses are up. I'm freaked out a little bit just going into it. And my buddy and I were the kind of people who would stay up really late, like way past midnight, just talking. We didn't have anything else to do. There's no video games, so we just talk. And as we're staying up talking, probably like, I don't know, maybe 1 a.m. it was, we could hear somebody chopping wood outside. So we look out the window to where the wood pile is, and there's nobody there. And when you look out, the wood chopping stops. So we just brush it off, keep going on a conversation. And then the wood chopping starts back up again. It was the weirdest thing. And it just kept happening like that over and over. And every now and then we'd hear somebody walking around downstairs, and his older brother sleeping directly beneath us where we're hearing these footsteps. So we think it's just his older brother getting up to go to the bathroom or get a drink of water. So we asked his brother the next day, hey, why were you up, like, walking around so much last night? And he was like, I wasn't getting up at all. I was just sleeping like a baby. So there was definitely, as far as I'm concerned, something going on at that place.
Damn, I hear a lot of stories actually where someone will hear something and be like, "Man, why are you making those noises?" And the person they're accusing is like, "I don't know what you're talking about."
Mm-hmm. Always in haunted houses, it's the footsteps.
Mm.
Nobody's upstairs, but someone's walking around up there anyway. Oh well.
I actually heard a bunch of thumping maybe a week ago while I was trying to sleep. Now it wasn't that it didn't actually turn out to be anything. It was just the cat. But I woke up to it, and my brain immediately went to something's in the attic. So I begrudgingly get out of the bed, I get my lights, I get my gun, and I go up to the attic to investigate. And like, it was the dead of night. You're not thinking super logically, but my heart was pounding. For whatever reason, I was sure I was going to see some horrible thing in my attic, but it was nothing. It was just a cat, I think.
What was the cat doing in the attic? How did it get up there?
Well, the cat wasn't actually in the attic. I just thought I heard the noises in the attic.
Okay. So
for whatever reason.
It sounded like it was coming from the attic.
Right.
I had a similar experience last night. I was laying in bed, and I feel something shake the bed. I'm just like, oh, come on. This has never happened to me in my life. Please don't happen to me now. And then I lift up my covers, and my ferret is literally underneath my covers, like right next to my feet, just scratching herself. I was like, oh, never mind.
Huh. I could get a little spooked sometimes at night. I've always been sort of afraid of, not afraid, but, well, I guess paranoid of home invasions. So every time I hear the cat, like, thumping around the house or whatever, my brain's like, someone's in the house, or, there's a creature in the attic. You know what I mean?
That's not a bad quality to have, honestly.
Maybe not.
Leave no stone unturned. If something's going bump in the night, you better check it out.
Better safe than sorry, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Actually, you know what? I have one more story to tell before we wrap things up.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, this actually didn't happen on that property. My parents got divorced, so I had two homes. I had my father's house, which was the Civil War-ridden property, and I had my mother's house, which is farther east in King William County. And I don't know if if they're related at all. Because I was using the Echovox app at the time. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, and this never happened before, except for like this month period that started happening. My bedroom door would just slowly but surely close on its own at random. At night, I'd be sitting there playing Xbox, and it'll just slowly close. I remember being a little just a little scared of it at first, but there was literally nothing but the door just closing on its own. So it just became annoying at that point. It wasn't anything like scary.
Yeah.
It never happened before, and I definitely speculated that it was something paranormal, but I was just like, oh, cool, my bedroom door closed by itself again.
Did you ever check to see if there was any reason that it would do that, via like a gust of wind or something like that?
I never checked, mostly because it just never happened before, and it doesn't happen anymore, actually. It only happened in that month, maybe 2 month period.
Okay, that's really interesting.
And this was maybe 2 years after we moved into that house. The door never did that until around that time, and then it just stopped one day.
The reason I say that's interesting is because these sort of, I guess you could call it poltergeisty sort of activity where objects are moving on their own. Those usually only come in small batches at a time. And, it'll be dormant for a long while before starting up again. So it'd be interesting to hear if that ever does happen again. But I think that lends a little credence to the fact that might be what it is some sort of pent-up energy causing that door to close on its own.
Huh.
I also had a similar experience where I had just whenever I went into the bathroom, something that would be on the bathroom counter would start moving or shaking. And eventually I was just like, okay, this is silly. A cup slides all the way across the counter, which is in 4 feet. If a bartender slid a glass of beer down the bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was that sort of motion, that sort of speed too. And I was like, okay, this is dumb. So I picked up the glass and I put it back where it was supposed to be. And I said, this goes here. And then it stopped. And I always felt like my asserting control and my dominance over it might have been one of the reasons why it stopped happening.
That's very interesting. It's always funny because when people have a lot of paranormal experiences, eventually they keep happening, and it's not even anything to be worried about or fearful of anymore. It's just funny or annoying. It's like, oh, that's happening again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it just becomes sort of part of every day. I mean, they definitely notice that it's odd and out of the usual. But for them, it's like, yeah, okay, I've seen this before. Here we go again.
Absolutely.
And there are only just those certain, I guess you could say, marked individuals, or some people call it being tagged when you see a cryptid multiple times. There's got to be something about these people that attracts whatever that energy is.
Maybe. I've actually tried looking for that crawler or whatever it was a couple times, whether I'm in the woods looking for it. I've set up game cameras with bait, and I've never saw it again. Kind of wish I could. And this time I'll have my flashlight, I hope.
Yeah, I wish I could be with you when you do see it, man. I've always wanted to see one of these things and definitely learn more about them. But it's never been in my cards. I've gone out to hot spots for, Bigfoot and crawlers and things like that. And, it's 1 in 100 chance you're going to see something like that. And I haven't been out 100 times. So I guess I just got to keep trying. Or maybe it's not, my energy's not the sort of thing that attracts those things. I really don't know how to spin it. I don't know what the truth behind that is.
I also kind of feel like maybe if you're actually seeking them out, you're not going to find them. You're more likely to find them if you're not looking, which is a true thing that happens in nature. I would know because I used to do this thing called herping. You probably don't know what that is, but
I have no idea.
I used to be really into snakes and reptiles and that sort of thing. And a hobby me and my dad always had was to go out in the woods and go looking for snakes or frogs or whatever to catch, just, to have fun. And we always noticed that when we weren't looking for them, we'd find them. We'd find a snake just right under our legs or, whatever. But
it's kind of the same way with your car keys. It's like, hey, I've got to go to work in 5 minutes. Where are my keys? They're nowhere to be found. So yeah, whenever you're looking for something, you can't find it. That tends to be the case, for sure.
I feel like maybe that actually happens in nature where an animal will sense that another animal's actually on the hunt for something as opposed to just aimlessly wandering.
Yeah, it's kind of like that feeling that you're being watched, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, that does make sense. A deer will wander on the road because they're just cars. You can't sense anything on the hunt. But if you're actually going hunting, the deer seem super skittish or whatever,
Oh, yeah.
So maybe they do actually sense those kind of things. And maybe the same thing applies to the cryptids, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you might be right about that. I think it also might just have something to do with, I don't know. For me, it feels like a vibration that a person gives off as to whether or not these things will show themselves. Because I have people who are just complete skeptics, good friends of mine, complete skeptics of anything paranormal because they've never seen anything personally or nothing, extraordinary enough where they would say, there is something beyond what we know about what we can observe.
Oh, trust me, I've got friends like that too.
Oh yeah, and I feel like there might be something about those people where these things just don't present themselves.
That could be possible.
Yeah, whereas you have other people who get this kind of stuff all the time, or at least in small doses.
Hmm.
So I was curious how you feel about going out in the woods. It seems like your experiences haven't deterred you 1 cent.
Oh, not at all. Honestly, sometimes I go into woods with hopes that I see something. I just enjoy the thrill of it. I like I like the idea that there's something beyond my understanding that I could maybe one day learn more about, discover.
Yeah, it's kind of like going out and seeing a bald eagle, or in my case, a mink. I've seen 4 minks this year, and I'd never seen a mink in the wild before. It was amazing.
For me, it'd probably be seeing a hognose snake in the wild. Never seen one, but definitely on my big bucket list.
I wouldn't know one if I saw it.
They're small, fat. They got like a little pig snout looking thing, sort of.
Okay, yeah, that sounds awesome. I guess I would be able to recognize that just based on the name.
Mm.
I was curious, have you ever eaten snake?
Have not, although I wouldn't not try it.
I had a experience kind of near Richmond. I wasn't sure exactly where we were, but it was like way out in the countryside, somewhere around Richmond. My friend of mine was having like a camp out party kind of thing. And one of the little kids who was there found a copperhead and alerted an adult who immediately beheaded the thing, skinned it, and they were like, anybody want this body of a copperhead? Perfectly good. So we decided we were going to put it on a steak and we're going to fry it over the fire. And I got to say, it was quite good. We put some Tony Cheshire sauce on it. Or not sauce, but, the salty powder stuff. And it was, as they say, just like chicken, except way bonier. It's like if you take the bones from a fish and calcify them a little bit more so they're really crunchy, and then just put that on like a tube of meat. That's kind of what it was like.
That's actually a really good way to describe that.
Yeah, I can't say I'd regret it. I'd eat it again. I'll say that much.
Interesting. I'll have to
Not
try
that
that
I'm
one
going
day.
shopping for snake meat, but I would definitely if I came across it.
I've actually never seen a copperhead on my own in the wild before.
No way. That's probably the second most common snake in Virginia, I would think, considering the amount that I see them.
Oh yeah. Actually, you know what? I did see it once. It was a little juvenile, like a really small one, like fairly young. But we did end up having to kill it because it was near chickens and dogs and farm animals, and that's really dangerous, especially when they're young. Fun fact, because a venomous snake, when they're young, has no control over how much venom they're actually pumping into you when they bite you. So they're like, I don't know, 10 times more deadly, something like that. So definitely something to look out for. If you see a baby snake and it's venomous, way more dangerous than the adults.
And that was today's educational segment on Odd Virginia. Thank you so much for that, Shane.
You're very welcome.
Hey, well, it's been great talking to you, man. And I do hope that you get another glimpse of this thing out in the wild. Based on its demeanor, it seems like it means you no harm. I know other people would advise against it, especially if you read anything on Reddit. Everyone's telling you to stay out of the woods after seeing something like that. But no,
absolutely.
I think you're green light good to go. And don't take my word as doctrine. You have my blessing.
Thank you. And if I ever do see it again, or shoot, if I could catch a picture or something, I'll definitely reach out to you, tell you about it.
Oh, that would be the ultimate, man. Yeah, thank you for keeping me in mind.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it, brother. You have a good night.
Yeah, you too as well. Thank you.
And there you have it, everybody. It's another wonderful retelling of a story of an encounter with the pale crawler, the forest ghoul, the Wendigo. Man, these creatures fascinate me. I wish I could just know more about them, about their nature, where they come from, what they eat. There's a lot of folklore surrounding these things, coming way back from the old Algonquin tribes, and they say that the Wendigo is a person who was possessed by the spirit of a Wendigo after committing cannibalism. And I know it sounds gruesome, but way back in the day when winters got cold and meat was scarce, sometimes these people would eat their own. And I know it's kind of disgusting, but that's history. And they say that after a person would partake in cannibalism, they were open to being possessed by the spirit of the Wendigo. And once they were possessed, they would transform into this horrible creature with an insatiable appetite for human flesh. Their limbs would elongate, they would suffer frostbite in their ears and their nose, and their lips would all fall off. And whenever they would appear, they would bring with them snow and ice. Now, whether or not all of this is true, I don't know. Current encounter reports do not seem to line up with the Algonquin folklore, and that just makes it all the more mysterious. We're at square one with these things, we really are. We have no idea what they are, where they come from, or what they want. And I've heard people say, though, this is absolutely impossible that a Wendigo could be anywhere but the Great Lakes region where all the Algonquin tribes were. But I've got news for you. Algonquin tribes stretched all the way to California and even down here in Virginia. The Powhatan or Powhatan tribe is an Algonquin tribe, and they're native to this region right here. So it makes perfect sense that their monsters or evil spirits could be here. But even then, that's just a name that they had for something that they were seeing. Anywhere else, it could be called something different. I know these things exist in different places. I've heard stories of them in California as well as South Carolina, so I know they're around. They make their rounds. They explore. And we also had some stories here from Shane about Civil War ghosts. Now, this being a Virginia-based paranormal podcast, I feel like we've got a lot more of that coming down the pipe. So we'll just wait and see, but this was ground zero for the Civil War, and it seems like a lot of that energy, or those spirits, might still be lingering around. Those are just my thoughts. If you want to share your thoughts, your ideas, your explanations for any of these things, you can go ahead and put them in the comments if you're on YouTube. Otherwise, you can send me an email. I love discussing these kinds of things, and that email address is oddvirginia@protonmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And the music that you're listening to right now is called Port 11. It is on my SoundCloud. I'll leave a link for that in the show notes. I always do. And also that Rick Grebenik video I was talking about earlier in the show, I'm going to link that as well, just so you guys can get a good look at this crawler that is stalking this man. I'm telling you guys, it is very, very creepy, and you're going to love it. Is it hoaxable? Yeah, probably, but is it real? I lean towards yes. But that's really up for you to decide for yourself whether or not you're going to believe this video. But yeah, that's in the show notes, and that's all I've got for tonight, everybody. So you have a good night. I'm signing off.